If you're someone who needs to access the records of a taxpayer, such as a loan officer or a title company, or you're someone who's going to represent somebody before the IRS, such as a CPA, attorney, or EA, or maybe you're a family member of a recently deceased loved one, then you might be wondering, how do you complete Form 8821 or Form 2848? Well, in this brief video, I'm going to give you a step-by-step tutorial showing you how to complete each and every section, make sure that everything is in the right format so that you get it completed right the first time and the IRS doesn't send it back to you with any rejects. Let's get to it. Welcome to Tax Chit Chat, the place where we talk all things tax all the time. The one thing to note is that Form 8821 is used if you are trying to just simply get information from the IRS as it relates to a taxpayer. Form 2848 is if you are going to actually represent that taxpayer and you need to conduct some type of act. The links to both forms and their associated instructions are contained in the description of this video. So make sure you check those out after you finish watching this, as they will provide much more detail as it relates to any of the items that I am going to discuss. So starting with the Form 2848, item number 1 is where the taxpayer enters in their information. So in this particular form, we can see the taxpayer, Roscoe P. Coltrane, has entered in his information. Hazard, Georgia. I wonder where that's at. But what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you enter in the taxpayer's social security number, and you're also going to make sure that you enter in a phone number. Now, the IRS is generally not going to call you, but once again, just make sure that you enter in the numbers, and also make sure you put them in the right fields. I've sometimes seen people, transpose them and put them in the wrong field. So in the second section is where the representative enters in their information. So on the left-hand side, we can see my name and my address. And then on the right-hand side, we can see the CAF number. The CAF number is a 9-digit number that allows the IRS to basically understand who you are representing, how many people you're representing, how many forms are on file, etc. Now, if you're a representative and you've never ever filed a 2848, then you are going to put none in this field. And what's going to happen is the IRS will then assign you a CAF and they will mail you your CAF number for future reference. You're also going to include your PTIN number and then a phone and a fax number. And then on the left-hand side, you see the box that if you check that box, you will receive notifications that the taxpayer receives. Anytime we're representing a taxpayer, we always check the box because we want to receive the exact same notifications that the taxpayer receives. That way, we're all on the same page and we know what's going on. Now, Section 3 of the 2848, this is one area that will differ slightly from the 8821. The 2848 talks about the acts that you are authorized, and you're basically saying, I authorize my representative to receive and inspect my confidential tax information and to perform the acts I can perform with respect to the tax matters below. So in Section 3, what you're basically going to tell them is, or you're going to tell the IRS is, these are the matters that I want to be able to represent the taxpayer on. And you want to be as complete and thorough as possible. Because if you only put one matter and then later on you need to deal with an additional matter, the IRS is going to require a new 2848. But what we've done is I've put the fields that we commonly assign when we are dealing with a taxpayer that maybe has an income tax problem. So on the first line, you can see we say income tax. And then on the second line, you see civil penalty. And then on the third line, you see we say separate assessment. Now, on the right of each item, we put the form if there is an associated form. So when we're dealing with income tax on an individual level, it's going to be Form 1040. When we're dealing with civil penalties, there isn't really a form, so you just simply put NA. And when we're dealing with separate assessments are when there's an assessment against maybe a joint spouse and then it potentially gets broken out on a mirrored account. So now it's on one spouse or the other spouse. You usually need to see separate assessments if there's tax debt that is for an old matter and the spouses are no longer together. The debt could have been reassigned to one spouse or another, and without putting separate assessment, you may not be able to see it. The last thing you're going to do on the right is you're going to tell them the years or the periods that you want to be a representative for. So on income tax, we usually will just put 1999, and then we will also put 3 years out. So you can file a 8821 or 2848, allowing you to go 3 years in the future. So since we're in 2022, that would allow us to go out to 2025. So we set it up that way. Now, the one thing to note is that for certain tax types, the period is actually not a year. It may be a quarter. So for example, with payroll taxes or civil penalties, it's a quarter. So there's 4 quarters that you can pick. You can pick 3, 6, 9, or 12. So for our civil penalty, you see that we are going from 1999-03 through 2025-12. So that allows us to get first quarter of 1999 all the way through last quarter of 2025. If you're representing a business, this section is going to look a little bit different. So what you see on the screen now are the common setup or the common descriptions and tax types that we usually request when we are dealing with a business. So once again, it would be income, but the form number would then be the corporate form. So 1120, 1120S, 1065, and 1099. And once again, we just set it up for 1999 to 2025. We also may want to be dealing with a corporate election, so whether that is an S Corp election or entity classification election. And those forms are 2553, 8832, and 8893. And then once again, we can set those up because they can be at different periods. So we would set that up 1999-03 to 2025-12. And then the last thing that you're commonly going to be dealing with a business, at least from a tax matter perspective, is going to be employment taxes. So this is payroll taxes. So we'd be looking at 941s, 940s, and 944s. And once again, we set it up for 1999 through 2025. Now, if this is an 8821, this section looks different in the sense that you're basically saying you are authorized to receive confidential tax information, but you're not authorized to do any acts. So you can't resolve anything with the IRS with an 8821. But once again, you would see that it would have tax information on the left, the tax form, then you would have the years. And if there were specific tax matters that needed to be addressed, that's what you would put in column D. So jumping back to the 2848, item number 4 discusses specific uses that are not recorded in the centralized authorization file or your CAF file. And this can be things such as private letter rulings. It could be things like an EIN application. But if there's something that you needed to address that is not basically handled within the CAF file, then you would go ahead and put that here. Once again, I'll defer you to the instructions because the instructions give you a very good list of things that you would include here. 5A is where you indicate additional acts that you're authorized for. Traditionally, as a representative, we will go ahead and check the boxes for access my IRS records via intermediate service provider or substitute or add a representative. This allows us to swap representatives so that you don't have to put new 2848s on file. And then the intermediate service provider, if you're using software such as Tax Help Software or THS, you're using IRS Logix, Pitbull, Canopy, IRS Solutions, any of these providers to access the individual's tax records, you're going to need to check that box in order to make it happen. Now, 5B is for specific acts that you are not authorized. So if there's something that you should not be authorized for or don't need to have access for, then you're going to list that there. Item number 6, retention or revocation of a previous power of attorney. The thing that comes into play sometimes is that a person will have a prior representative prior to potentially engaging you. So if somebody has had a prior power of attorney, when you put your power of attorney on, it will revoke it. So if your taxpayer wants you to keep a prior power of attorney on file, you would need to check that box in order to keep it. Otherwise, it's going to get blown out, and your power of attorney will be the guiding or ruling power of attorney on file with the IRS. The last thing is that the individual must actually sign the form saying that they are authorizing you to be a power of attorney. So you will go ahead and sign. So Roscoe P. Coltrane goes ahead and puts his name down, adds his signature, would add his date. And if this is an entity, meaning like if this is a business and you're the representative for that business, maybe you're an officer, etc., you will go ahead and indicate the name of the entity and your title if applicable. Now, part 2 is where the representative, such as myself, will put their information, and you're going to list what type of designation you have. You're going to go ahead and put your license number. You will then sign the form and date the form, and that will complete the 2848. On an 8821, the representative doesn't sign because there is no representative. And that's how you complete Form 2848 and Form 8821. So, until we meet again, remember to keep earning, keep learning, and just like that, this chat is adjourned.